Have you ever paused to consider how much of your pain stems from your fixation on control? Not just the outer world, jobs, bills, routines, but the inner world too. That tightening urge to be certain, to know what comes next, to fully define who you are, what you want, where you're headed. We've been taught to seek clear answers, as though life is a puzzle to be solved. But the truth, uncomfortable, often ignored, is that this craving for certainty might be what keeps you furthest from what you truly long for. Peace. Maybe you're tired, worn out from trying to map the unpredictable, from building flawless plans that fall apart with the faintest gust of change. Maybe you're stuck in that fog of anxiety, where every unknown becomes a threat, where mystery feels like a foe. But what if the problem isn't the uncertainty? What if the real burden is your refusal to allow it? Michel de Montaigne, a French thinker from the 1500s, saw this long before most. While others clung to rigid doctrines and absolute truths, he did something uncommon. He looked inward. He studied his own mind, his fears, his contradictions. And he wrote not as someone who had answers, but as someone who learned to live more honestly with the questions. That's what's needed now. Not more certainty, but a new way to relate to what you can't control. Imagine a gentler, braver approach to life. One where, as Montaigne discovered, releasing the struggle against the unknown changes everything. Anxiety softens, pressure fades, and for the first time in a while, life feels lighter. But don't be fooled. This simplicity isn't external. It's not about fixing the world around you. It's an inner shift, a quiet revolution. It begins the moment you stop gripping so tightly. When you let go of the illusion of control and take a step, not toward definitive answers, but toward a different way of existing. It begins with a simple phrase, "I don't know," and that's okay. Montaigne was no ordinary philosopher. He didn't preach or design abstract systems. He didn't try to force life into neat, rational shapes. He sat with himself, alone, surrounded by books, and turned his attention to the most complex, unstable subject there is, his own humanity. His writings are not lectures, they are mirrors. He didn't write to convince. He wrote to invite, to reflection, to doubt, to self-exploration. He dared to share his fears, his flaws, his contradictions. Not in spite of them, but because they were part of being alive. Unlike others who hunted for absolute truths, Montaigne leaned into the mystery. He didn't know, and the older he got, the more comfortable he became with that. To him, admitting ignorance wasn't weakness, it was freedom. A way to stop performing, to remove the mask, to stop pretending you've got it all figured out. Our modern world resists this kind of humility. We live in a culture of opinions, takes, and declarations, certainty presented as strength. But Montaigne offers another path, to be human first, before being right. He believed our uncertainties, our inconsistencies, our doubts. They aren't flaws to fix. They are proof that we are still learning, still living, still open. And maybe that's what you need to hear right now, that you don't have to be finished to be valuable, that it's fine not to have it all worked out, that it's okay to be incomplete. Montaigne gave himself permission to evolve, to change his mind, to contradict himself. He understood that the human mind shifts, bends, and grows. And rather than fight that, he met it with warmth, with wit, with curiosity. He knew that living isn't about mastering the world with unshakable beliefs. It's about meeting it with softness and wonder. That's why Montaigne still matters. In a world full of shouting, he whispers. In a time of rigid beliefs, he reminds us of the beauty of doubt. So, if you're feeling lost, crushed by the expectation to be consistent, finished, solid, maybe what you're missing isn't direction. Maybe what you're missing is freedom. The freedom to change, to not know, to simply be. But Montaigne doesn't just encourage doubt. He cautions against avoiding it, because the more we try to dominate life, the more life resists us. And in that resistance, we suffer. What's the one thing you keep trying to control, even though deep down you know you can't? Write it in the comments, seriously, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about now, the silent suffering that comes from the desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. And if this resonates with you and you want to dive deeper into ideas like this, I've written an ebook called Guided by the Greats, A Path to Self-Growth. The link is in the pinned comment and the description. You try to control everything, don't you? tomorrow, other people's reactions, your career, your body, your emotions, even the things that never depended on you. And the more you try to tighten your grip on life, the more it slips right through your fingers. Like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter the squeeze, the faster it escapes. And you pay for it. Not just with stress, but with your peace of mind. This obsession with control is not just tiring, it's corrosive. It turns you into a prisoner of your own expectations, constantly scanning for what could go wrong. And that feeling? That's anxiety. At its root, anxiety is the fear of uncertainty. It's the mind's desperate demand for guarantees in a world that never promised any. Most people live on high alert, always trying to anticipate what's next, as if that could somehow protect them from the blows of existence. But centuries ago, Michel de Montaigne, long before modern psychology caught up, understood this. Living in constant anticipation is a kind of war against reality. The deepest suffering doesn't come only from what happens to us. It comes from fighting what happens, from wishing things were different, from resisting the natural rhythm of life. Montaigne wrote about this with rare honesty. He didn't try to eliminate his pain, loss, or confusion. He embraced them, not as enemies, but as part of being human. And in that acceptance, he found freedom. Think about the most controlling people you know. Are they calm, flexible, peaceful? Or are they tense, rigid, exhausted? They don't rest because they believe if they ever stop managing everything, something terrible will happen. But that belief doesn't protect them. It traps them. Montaigne offered an alternative: conscious surrender. Not passive resignation, but active acceptance. A brave recognition that the world is not yours to command, and your mind must learn to adapt, not conquer. And here's the tragic irony. The more you chase control, the more frustrated you become. And the more frustrated you are, the more control you think you need. It's a cycle that devours you from the inside. So, what's the result? A tense body, a burned-out mind, a restless spirit. Montaigne offers a different kind of wisdom, that living well isn't about mastering everything. It's about learning to coexist with what can't be mastered. But how do you actually do that? How do you face the unknown without losing yourself in it? The answer lies in the way Montaigne approached life, with deep, constant self-reflection. Not as cold analysis, but as a kind of inner listening. While the world shouted for certainty, Montaigne chose silence. He turned inward. What he found wasn't clarity, but contradiction. Fears, confused desires, irrational impulses. All the messy things most of us hide, he confronted them. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Montaigne's genius wasn't in building theories about the human mind. It was in becoming the experiment. He turned himself into a subject of observation and his writing into a mirror. He didn't teach from above. He shared from within. He didn't aim to shape others' thoughts. He aimed to free them. By openly sharing his doubts, his impulses, his moments of weakness, he revealed something revolutionary. You don't have to be right to be real. You just have to be honest. And that kind of honesty, unfiltered, compassionate self-observation, is one of the most profound forms of self-knowledge that exists. But be careful. Looking within isn't about self-criticism. It's about learning to see yourself clearly and gently. To notice when you're faking certainty. When you're clinging to an identity that no longer fits. When you're pretending to know what you don't. Montaigne wrote to break free from all that. He once said, "I am human, and nothing human is alien to me." That includes you, every confusing, difficult, raw part of you. It all belongs. And perhaps the most powerful result of this practice? It dissolves shame. Because the moment you stop pretending to be perfect and start observing yourself with sincerity, you begin to heal. You start to live. You may not realize it, but much of your suffering stems from the silent pressure to become someone ideal. Someone emotionally balanced, intellectually sharp, morally unshakable. A polished version of yourself shaped by unreachable standards. But Montaigne reminds us, we are not marble statues. We are living, breathing contradictions. Flawed, shifting, uncertain, and beautifully human. The simplicity we seek begins not with striving for perfection, but with letting go of the war against our own nature. And here lies a paradoxical truth. True acceptance is not passivity. In fact, it is the most radical beginning of real transformation, because only those who see themselves without illusion can truly change. Only those who embrace their shadows can walk in the direction of light. But there's another layer we often ignore, even when we start to see ourselves more clearly. Change. Nothing in you, in others, or in the world stays the same. And until we learn to live in harmony with that reality, we will keep breaking against it. Most people live with the fantasy that life should follow a straight line. That one day, once the right knowledge or stability or success is reached, everything will finally settle. That doubts will vanish, that emotions will be neatly aligned, that life will make complete sense. But this is a comforting illusion, sold by belief systems, schools, self-help gurus, even corporations, and it distances us from both peace and reality. Montaigne saw through it with piercing clarity. He recognized that everything in life pulses in motion. Thoughts shift, bodies age, desires evolve, people change, certainties dissolve. Nothing is fixed, nothing guaranteed, nothing final. Trying to live as if life were static, predictable, controlled, orderly, is to prepare ourselves for endless disappointment and subtle suffering. Change is not an anomaly, it is the rule. And the more we fight it, the more rigid, bitter, and disconnected we become. Montaigne did not resist this flow, he flowed with it. He accepted inconsistency as a mark of maturity. He welcomed changing his mind as a sign of strength. And he understood that letting go of old convictions, even if the new ones were still uncertain, was a step toward greater awareness. Constancy, he provocatively claimed, is the virtue of mechanical minds. To him, living well was not about clutching to a fixed identity, but about learning to dance with impermanence. Think about it. Aren't most of your fears rooted in the possibility of change? Fear of losing someone, fear of losing control, fear of things not staying the same. But what if you stopped resisting change? What if, instead of seeing each transformation as a threat, you saw it as evolution? Accepting change doesn't mean surrendering in defeat. It means ending the war against life as it is. It means learning to ride the wave, not dam the ocean. The lightness so many people are chasing isn't found in rigid stability. It's born from inner flexibility, the ability to let go, to adapt, to begin again. Montaigne understood this deeply, and perhaps quietly, you're starting to understand it too. But seeing change as natural isn't the end of the path. It's only the start. Because even with this understanding, we still have to live with uncertainty, with chaos, with the unknown. And that's where philosophy becomes practice. Montaigne didn't write to sound clever, he wrote to survive. His essays were not detached theories, they were tools. He used them to wrestle with death, sadness, insecurity, the aging body, the wandering mind. He turned self-reflection into a daily act of courage. Perhaps his greatest gift was this: the idea that to think honestly about life is to learn how to bear it more wisely, with more dignity, and a little less suffering. But how do you actually live with uncertainty? It's not a switch you flip. It's a discipline, a practice, a gradual re-education of the mind. Not discipline as in punishment, but as a quiet commitment to your own freedom. Because living well with the unknown is a choice you make again and again. Here are a few Montaignian principles that can reshape your relationship with uncertainty. First, question your certainties. The next time you feel 100% sure, stop. Observe, reflect. Absolute certainty is often fear in disguise. Much of what we call certainty is nothing more than a defense mechanism against the discomfort of not knowing. Montaigne understood this deeply. He questioned even his own thoughts, not out of insecurity, but out of wisdom. He knew the most dangerous idea is the one that refuses to be revised. He practiced what could be called self-questing, not as a performance, but as a ritual. He wrote, not to impress, but to understand. Hundreds of pages, all directed inward, letters unsent, notes without audience. For him, writing was not a product, it was a mirror, a way to sort the chaos, to make his mind a place he could live in. Another of his quiet principles: embrace impermanence as an organizing force. Plan, yes, but know that life will change, and with it, your plans. Flexibility is not weakness, it is strength in its most enduring form. Instead of anchoring your peace in fragile certainties, Montaigne would urge you to move lightly, to adjust, to bend. He wrote that the wisest are those who know how to change with the things that change, and perhaps most unexpectedly, laugh at yourself. Not as self-deprecation, but as release. Montaigne didn't posture. He mocked his fears. He named his inconsistencies. He smiled at his own vanity. Humor, to him, was a tool of liberation, a quiet revolt against the heavy expectations we place on ourselves. It says, "I am human, and that is enough." But none of this works without space. Reserve moments for silence, not isolation, but clarity. No phones, no noise, no stimulation, just presence. For Montaigne, solitude was not withdrawal. It was the place where truth began to speak. It was in stillness that he heard what he really thought. It was in the quiet that uncertainty stopped being a threat and started becoming fertile ground for possibility. All of these practices lead to something essential, something often spoken of but rarely understood: freedom. The freedom to be who you are without needing to know everything. The freedom to move lightly, even when the ground is unstable. The freedom to belong fully to yourself. This is where Montaigne gently takes our hand and brings us to the heart of the matter. He did not want you to merely survive the chaos. He wanted you to dance with it. Because in the end, everything you tried so hard to control was never yours to hold. Life was never designed to obey your timelines, your conditions, your emotional spreadsheets. People will change, plans will fail, emotions will shift. And none of this is a mistake. It is simply the nature of things. Montaigne saw this with an almost uncomfortable clarity. Suffering doesn't come from change. It comes from our refusal to let change move through us, from our attempt to freeze what was always meant to flow. But something begins to shift the moment you stop resisting. Not out there, but within. Rigidity softens. Anxiety loses its grip. You no longer need to fight what is. You begin to move with it. This is not resignation. It is wisdom. It is maturity, and it is freedom. The freedom to live without needing a label for every emotion, without needing a reason for every loss, without needing a roadmap for every choice. Life does not demand perfection. It asks only for your presence. The simplicity so many chase is not out there. It's not in a problem-free life or a flawless routine. It is found in the moment you let yourself not know. In the moment you can say, honestly and without shame, I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. Because it's there, in the humble space of not knowing, that true peace begins to take root. A peace not tied to circumstance, but to clarity. A peace that comes from within. Montaigne taught that by accepting our ignorance, we don't become weak, we become human. And in becoming human, we become free. So pause. Ask yourself quietly, what part of you still clings to control? What part fears the unknown? And what would it feel like to simply let go? Not to give up, but to soften. Not to retreat, but to flow. Not to solve everything, but to be present for what is as it is. Because maybe that's what living truly means. Not mastering life, but learning to meet it moment by moment as it comes. Moment